What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here with the Face Off Sports Network with my top starts and sits at the tight end position for NFL Week 6. Before we get into the action, let's recap last week. I'd like to preface that my barometer in PPR scoring formats where I gauge hits and misses is 10 PPR points. Anything more than 10, I count it as a hit. Anything less than 10, I count it as a miss. A couple of close ones here. Tyler Conklin, I told you to start him, 11.5 PPR points. That's a hit. Jake Ferguson, 13 PPR points. That's a hit. My other start, which was a miss, Mike Gesicki at 5.1. When it comes to the sits, Dalton Schultz, 7.1. Pat Freiermuth, 9.2. Mark Andrews, 9.5. They're all misses. I mean, they're all hits as they finished with under 10. But Freiermuth, Andrews, they came really close. But according to how I view things and every channel, every content creator, every NFL guy, fantasy guy, it's different. I use 10 points in PPR scoring formats as my barometer for hits and misses. So nice week last week, 5-1 overall. And what we're going to do, we're going to take that momentum and carry that into week 6. Let's get started with my starts. I'm going right back to Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson right now should be started every week, but until the consensus views him as a must start, I'm going to keep telling you to start him. Ferguson last week, I just went over what he did. 13 PPR points. Since returning from injury in week 3, he has now gone over 11.9 PPR points in 3 straight games, at least 7 targets in 3 straight games. He has yet to score a touchdown, but giving us the receptions, the yards. He's dominating the tight end position for the Dallas Cowboys. He's being targeted on 25.2% of the routes he is running. He has 16.4% of his team targets, and he's not just a short yardage guy. Dak likes to target this guy deep. 54.3 air yards per game. That's 96th percentile amongst qualifying tight ends. He gets a tough matchup against Detroit, right? Like Detroit's pass defense against wide receivers, it's really leaky. You can throw all over that secondary. They're actually really good against a tight end. They're giving up the 9th fewest tight end PPR points. I want to attack this football team anyway. And as good as Detroit's been, and I'll tell you how good they've been, I'm also going to tell you the reason why I still like Ferguson. So Detroit, every tight end they faced, they've only allowed one to go over 10 PPR points. That was A.J. Barner against Seattle in week 4 going into the bye week. They've managed to hold down Parkinson, in Trey McBride. McBride's a really good tight end. They limited him. Why do I like Ferguson this week? Well, Jake Ferguson, he's volume, right? These other tight ends that the Detroit Lions limited, no tight end has seen north of 6 targets. And what did I just say? Since Ferguson has been back from injury, he's seen at least 7 targets in every game, one game in the double digits against Baltimore. Even in week 1, right? Week 1, Ferguson had 5 targets. He was en route for a lot more, possibly. He only played 37 offensive snaps. If you remember, he was injured, I believe, early in the second half. So we know this is Dak's go-to guy. He's a chain mover. When CeeDee Lamb is blanketed, he's going to look for Jake Ferguson. So we are in on Jake Ferguson this week, despite the tough matchup. Next, here's a surprising one. Dalton Schultz. I've been out on Dalton Schultz all year long. Listen, there's just too many guys. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. They throw it to the running backs out of the backfield. The most important wide receiver in this offense is Nico Collins, and he is now on the injured reserve list. Now, I like Xavier Hutchinson. I think the consensus immediate reaction, this is Tank Dell's time to shine. I think it is. But Xavier Hutchinson, similar build as Nico Collins. I think he steps into that Nico Collins role. And he's not going to give you Nico Collins production, but I do think he has some targets coming into his direction because that's a unique spot in the Bobby Slowick offense, which is coming from, obviously, the Kyle Shanahan offense. But enough about Xavier Hutchinson. Go pick him up if he's available, by the way. Let's talk about Dalton Schultz. I think Dalton Schultz gets an uptick in opportunity without Nico Collins. Nico's that chain mover. He's reliable. We know Dalton Schultz is reliable. Whether it was Dak Prescott for a couple of years or CJ Stroud last year, right? Pre-Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz had some good fantasy value. What's good about Dalton Schultz, he has yet to go, and it's not good he has yet to go over 10 PPR points, but what's good, after starting the year, 3 targets in the first 2 games, he's had at least 5 targets in 3 straight, season high 6 targets last week, consequently, had a season high 7.4 PPR points on 4 receptions for 34 yards. Well, what was unique about last week? The unique thing about last week is that Nico Collins exited the game. Nico Collins out. Dalton Schultz gets a couple more targets. Sometimes this stuff is easy. And that's the narrative I'm going to go with. I think we see Dalton Schultz, normally really reliable. I think he's going to be leaned on a little bit more. And this is a nice matchup that he gets against the New England Patriots. They're 19th when it comes to fantasy scoring at the tight end position. They've allowed in 3 straight games now. They were tight the first couple of games. They limited Cincy tight ends and Noah Fant against Seattle. Let's remember, Mike Gesicki dropped. He scored a touchdown in week 1. It was called back, stepped out of the end zone. But obviously, it doesn't count. But the production was there. In the past 3 games, however, they've given up 14.3 to Conklin, 14.5 to Kittle, 11.1 to Jonnu Smith. This defense has some holes in it in the middle of the field. And this is where I believe Dalton Schultz can finally help us out in the fantasy column. Let's go to my final start, Kyle Pitts. And this guy's ridiculous, right? Because when the hell can we trust Kyle Pitts, people? It is so hard. He is so volatile. He's had some good matchups this year that he didn't show up for, notably against Kansas City. The easiest matchup for any tight end. He only goes for 7.9 PPR points. Last week against Tampa, one of the more difficult matchups, he goes for a season high 15.8, 7 of 8 targets, 88 yards. Hasn't caught a touchdown since week 1, but he saw a season high 8 targets last week. Now he gets a shot to build on it. I'm taking a chance here. I'm really taking a chance by trusting Kyle Pitts. This is the Carolina Panthers. This defense is bad. They can't stop the run. They struggle against wide receivers. They struggle against tight ends. So I'm going with Kyle Pitts this week. This, on paper, this is a good matchup, and Kyle Pitts is good enough he should be able to exploit these damn matchups. And this Falcons offense took a couple of weeks. It's starting to look legit. It's starting to click. It started last week, and I think it could continue. And I think if this offense plays the way it did last week, there is going to be enough room for Kyle Pitts to produce in fantasy. Now, in week 1, Carolina's defense, that was gashed by the tight end. Moreau and Juwan Johnson both go for double digits. Since then, they've really limited tight ends. But who do they really play? The Chargers, their tight ends are really useless. They did shut down Bowers in week 3. Cincinnati tight ends, they gave up 6.1 to all. Gesicki, Sample, like that's a collection. Like those tight ends are either on or off. And then last week against Chicago, Everett and Kmet combined for 13 PPR points. So there's some room, right? There's some low-hanging fruit here for Kyle Pitts. Pitts is still good. He's only getting 13.2% of the team targets, which means he has to do a better job taking advantage of his opportunities. And I am willing to take that plunge with bye weeks and injuries in week 6. If you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the alert icon, so you can be notified anytime we go live to answer your questions. We go live almost every day. Or we drop content just like this. If you have any start-sit questions, waiver questions, trade questions, anything at all, drop in the comment section of this video. Myself or one of the members of the Face Off Sports Network staff We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Now let's go to my sits. Cole Kmet, he's leading off my sits. Cole Kmet had that one spike week in week 3. 11 targets, 10 for 97 and a ton. Since then, comes back down to earth. 3 and 4 targets the past 2 games. He's catching them. Not really doing a lot. Under 8.7 PPR points in the past 2 games and under 8.7 in all but that one spike week. The issue is they got DJ Moore. They've been running the ball really well. So it's not a Cole Kmet thing. It's the fact that this offense is loaded. And there's only so many opportunities to go around. And when DeAndre Swift is running the way he is in the past 2 games, that does take away some opportunities from Cole Kmet. And they, Jacksonville, tough matchup, 11th in fantasy scoring. They're the 11th toughest matchup for enemy tight ends. And what do you do against Jacksonville? They're secondary. You can throw on them. You can certainly run on them. I'm anticipating a heavy run game out of DeAndre Swift. I'm expecting a busy day out of DJ Moore, and that possibly means a slower day from Cole Kmet. And again, like Jacksonville, when we see teams like Jacksonville, like Detroit, that are really bad against wide receivers, they normally look good on paper against the tight ends because they're just getting hammered on the outside and in the slot. But just to be fair here, let's go over what Jacksonville has given up or not given up. Only 2 tight ends have gone over 11.7 PPR points in the double digits. Mo Alley-Cox, Dalton Kincaid, and the common denominator is that they scored a touchdown. So if you score a touchdown and you're a tight end against this team, you're probably getting in the double digits. So I'm looking at Cole Kmet as a touchdown-reliant tight end in week 6. We're sitting him. Let's go to the aforementioned Dalton Kincaid, and I'm sitting Dalton Kincaid. This is another guy. He has the one decent game against Jacksonville, gives us 13.1, but has been an utter disappointment all season long. Only one game with 7 targets 2 weeks ago. Cashed in 9.7, solid day. 6 targets last week against Houston, only 5.4, true for 34 as a receiver. His other games under 5 for 2 targets. The volume isn't there. We were drafting Dalton Kincaid. I was hyping Dalton Kincaid like he would be the next Kelsey almost in this offense. Well, they're kind of weird at wide receiver. They have a bunch of guys. They drafted Cole Kmet. He's versatile. I mean, they drafted Kincaid. He's versatile. He's a mismatch nightmare. They could put him in the slot. He's just not getting the usage that myself and a lot of other people out there thought he was getting. Oddly enough, is it about Cole Kmet? Or is it, I don't know why I keep calling Kincaid Kmet. Is it about Dalton Kincaid? Or is it about the lack of passing volume? Because on paper, he's being targeted on 22.2% of his routes. He's getting 18.9% of his team targets. 37.4 air yards per game. I just don't know if there's enough throwing volume yet in this offense for one guy to really flourish. And that worries me. And now this is a really tough matchup. The Jets are the 3rd toughest matchup on the calendar for enemy tight ends. They've limited just about everybody this season so far. And I don't know if I see that changing. And I like Kincaid a lot, but he's a player that he's volatile. He's really, really hard to trust right now. The Jets have yet to allow a tight end to go north of 8 PPR points. And the best one was Kittle in week 1 with that 8. And as far as what has Kincaid done historically against the Jets? Because that matters. In 2 games, 10 for 72, 0 touchdowns. So he's more or less of a high floor player. We're sitting Dalton Kincaid. My final sit is Dallas Goedert. And Dallas Goedert, past 2 games, sensational, over 13.2 PPR points in both. Week 3, pops for 27. What happened? Why? Because he started the year slow. What's the why? We know the why. Devonta Smith, concussion, missed some time. A.J. Brown, dealing with an injury, missed a couple games. Philly has their bye. Well, what's happening this week? We fully expect now A.J. Brown's practicing, Devonta Smith's practicing. The 2 top pass catching weapons in Philadelphia are returning. So the 11 and 8 game target shares for Dallas Goedert are expected to regress. And what do they go to? Well, he had 5 targets and 4 targets in the first 2 games. And that's what I pretty much expect when we have a healthy Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. They're going to command the lion's share of the pass catching opportunities along with Saquon Barkley. And to be fair, Goddard's one of the more efficient tight ends in the NFL. He's never really needed a lot of volume to return fantasy production, but he hasn't returned that elite fantasy production despite low volume this year yet, because of an addition like a Saquon Barkley who could punch it in on his own, because these wide receivers are playing at a high pace like they should be doing. And now Dallas Goedert gets a tough matchup against Cleveland. This team doesn't do a lot of things right, the Cleveland Browns. They've done a really nice job limiting the enemy tight end position. This is another team they have yet to allow an enemy tight end to go over 9.5 PPR points. That was Brenton Strange back in week 2. Actually, Jacksonville tight ends combined, Strange and Farrell, got about 13, 14 PPR points, but that was an anomaly. Every other guy has been shut down so far, and I am not really loving Dallas Goedert. He is my final sit. We're going to wrap it up from here. I'm Anthony Servino for the Face Off Sports Network. We'll